What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Celio's Network, the channel dedicated to providing you with competitive Pokemon TCG content. Today we're looking at Psychic Malamar, how it's going to change when Team Up comes out, how viable the archetype's going to be, its new strengths, its new weaknesses, and we'll take a look at some potential deck lists that I brewed up, and also some of the matchups against the Tier 1 and Tier 2 decks. Just a few of them, but to get an idea of how its matchups against important decks are going to look. So we're going to start out with looking at Psychic Malamar lists from Sun and Moon through Lost Thunder. These are both from Roanoke Regionals, which was standard. On the left, we have Jason Anacaraco's lists. He placed 14th. And then on the right, we have Beckett Pierce's list. He placed 5th in the tournament. So they're both Psychic Malamar, just some differences between the two. Looking at Jason's, he played a Ditto Prism Star, which we see is omitted in Beckett's list. Also, Jason played 2 Giratina Lost Thunder, whereas Beckett played 1 Giratina and 1 Deoxys from Celestial Storm. And then we also have 1 Marshadow GX and 2 regular Marshadow on Jason's side. And then on Beckett's, we have 2 Marshadow GX and just 1 Marshadow Let Loose. For the trainers, Jason's differences include that he played 4 Switch, while Beckett played 4 Escape Board. The Switch is actually better against mill variants because they'll trap things up, and then you can just switch them out. While Escape Board, you have to retreat. It's just a little bit different. I do prefer Escape Board, but we'll talk about which switching options are better when Team Up comes out. Then we had the 2 Nest Ball over on Jason's side, and no Nest Ball for Beckett, but he did play an Adventure Bag and 2 Choice Band. And then Jason played 11 Psychic Energy, and Beckett played 10. So you'll see the differences are fairly minuscule. They're both playing the 4-4 Malamar lines. They're playing the Necrozma GX, Dawnwings, the Necrozma GX, Giratina, Chimecho, Marshadow. It's just the counts are a little bit different, and some of the item choices are also fairly different. Both of these lists are really solid. Nothing inherently wrong with either of them, and they're both great as a baseline when you're building on with the new Team Up cards. So looking at a few big things that Team Up adds for Malamar, we have 3 Tag Team GXs, which we are going to want to try to use with Marshadow GX's ability Shadow Hunt that allows us to copy attacks from Pokemon in our discard pile. So looking at Latios and Latios GX Tag Team, it has a potential energy acceleration with its GX attack, and it has an Oko attack that has an awkward cost. So Buster Purge for Water Psychic Colorless does 240, but you have to discard 3 energy. The 3 energy discard isn't a huge issue. The water energy is where it gets weird, but we'll talk about that a little bit later in a theorized list I have where you might try Latios and Latios GX for something other than just its Aero Unit GX, which for 1 Psychic attaches 5 basic energy cards from your discard pile to your Pokemon in any way you like. Next is Gengar Mimikyu. So basically Horror House GX, even if you just have 1 Psychic energy and you're not getting the plus effect, it's like a better Bell of Silence. So your opponent can't play any cards from their hand during their next turn. And then if this Pokemon has at least 1 extra Psychic energy attached to it, you and your opponent both draw until you have 7 cards in each other's hands. And the 7-card draw synergizes with its Poltergeist attack, which does 50 for every trainer card in your opponent's hand. But Poltergeist is a little underwhelming compared to the guaranteed damage outputs we can have in Malamar decks. Lastly, but certainly not least, is Eevee and Snorlax Tag Team. It has Dump Truck Press, which does 120 for 4 colorless, and if the active Pokemon is an evolution, it does 120 more, so it does 240, which is insane. And then Megaton Friends GX, 210. If this Pokemon has at least 1 extra energy attached to it, you draw cards until you have 10 cards in your hand. Sorry about that. I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't shuffle draw. It's just draw 10. Draw until you have 10. And like I said, we're going to be wanting to copy these attacks with Marshadow GX. so we don't have this 3 prize liability out for our opponent to KO. Because if they KO a Marshadow GX, then it's just 2 prizes they're getting instead of the 3 which they would be rewarded for killing a tag team. So we're going to be wanting to put the tag team GXs in our discard in most cases. So these are some cards from Team Up to know for when we're going over the potential deck lists and also matchups in a bit. So Nanu is a supporter card that reads, switch a basic darkness Pokemon from your discard pile with one of your Pokemon in play. Discard the Pokemon you switched with. So that can turn a Lele into a Zorua or a Sneasel or so on and so forth. Tapu Koko Prism Star. Once during your turn, if this Pokemon is on your bench, you may attach 1 lightning energy from your discard pile to 2 of your benched Pokemon, then put this Pokemon into the Lost Zone. So it's a nice energy excel for lightning types. Zebstrika is a stage 1 with Raid Lightning Colorless 30+. If this Pokemon evolved from Blitzel this turn, this attack does 90 more damage, so it does 120 if it evolved from Blitzel that turn. I don't believe the lists that I have in this video or in these slides for Zapdos or Lightning type decks actually included Zebstrika, but it's something to keep in mind when theorizing these matchups that it might be included. Jirachi is a really great card coming out of Team Up. Its ability, Wish Star. Once during your turn, if this is your active Pokemon, you may look at the top 5 cards of your deck, choose 1 trainer card you find there, reveal it and put it into your hand. Shuffle the remaining cards back into your deck. Then this Pokemon is asleep. So being asleep isn't a big deal. If you have a skateboard, you can just, attach a skateboard, and that says if this Pokemon is asleep, you can still retreat it as if it wasn't. And Jirachi has 1 retreat. Ability Wish Star is a great ability to look at the top 5, get a trainer card, so it adds consistency. You can get a supporter, an Acrobike, an Ultra Ball, whatever you want. Team Rocket's Harassment is in 1 or 2 of the lists later on. Both players shuffle their hand into their deck and draw 5 cards. We don't have this outside of Japan. I'm not sure if places outside of Japan is ever getting Team Rocket's Harassment, but it can be replaced by like a Judge or a Let Loose or something of that nature. And then Zapdos is a huge card coming out of Team Up. Its attack, Assault Thunder for 10. If this Pokemon was on your bench and became your active this turn, it does 80 instead of 10. And it's not affected by weakness. That's something important to note. So going into the potential deck lists for Malamar after Team Up is out, here is number 1. So the bolded cards are the new cards from Team Up. So here we're looking at a list that hasn't changed too much from what we know previous to Team Up. I added 2 Jirachis. Since we're already playing the Forest Skateboard in here, the Jirachis might be super nice for consistency purposes. If you start it or if you switch into it, you can look at the top 5 for a trainer. And we play almost 30 trainers in this list specifically. So we're going to be finding Mysterious Treasure, Ultra Ball, Acrobike, or supporters with it most of the time. And that's really good to help us get set up because Malamar decks need to get Malamar out to actually play the game. I have 2 Giratina Lost Thunder. It can be either 1 Tina, 1 Deoxys, or just 2 Tina. The reason for playing a Deoxys in any of these lists over just 2 Giratina would be so you have a Pokemon that isn't putting that 40 damage or that 4 damage counters on one of your own Pokemon every time you attack if that attack isn't worth it. So sometimes that 4 damage counters will mean a lot on your board, like say if you're attacking against a Decidueye deck or another kind of spread deck. Snorlax EV Tag Team GX is the only GX I have included out of the tag teams for this list, and I'm actually going to have it in every list that I will be showing in this video because I think it's a card that should not be forgotten when you're building Malamar after Team Up is out. Snorlax EV Tag Team is just so good to do 240 to an evolution, especially when it's coming from Marshadow. I have thought about adding a DCE or 2 into these decks, and I definitely may toy with that when I actually have the cards IRL and on PTCGO or start proxying them in real life. But for right now, I haven't put any DCE into these lists, but like I said, it's something that I'm considering. So for the next list, I have more of a straightforward trying to get max consistency kind of list. So you'll see in the first list we have a Ditto Prism Star, we have 2 Jirachi team up, and then in this one we have 3 Jirachi team up, no Ditto Prism Star, and I've also dropped the second Marshadow GX. And we're adding in some more items like another Acro Bike and an Adventure Bag, and we're playing 3 Jirachi team up. And with those 3 Jirachi team up and the Adventure Bag, it's going to be easier to start Jirachi or get it out, and also find the escape board for the Jirachi. So like I said, this is just an idea that maybe Jirachi will become a typical inclusion for Malamar decks, but we're not really positive on that yet. Just taking a sip of water. So this one is actually my favorite, and the one that I want to test first, I think. So we're playing no Jirachi here, so it's much more classic. But what's different is we're also not playing a skateboard. I'm playing 3 Altar of the Moon, 2 Switch, and 1 Escape Rope for our switching options. This is because when looking at lists for the lightning type archetypes, I realized that Aether Paradise is going to be a huge problem. Especially against Zapdos, because we want to one-shot that with our Giratina or our Deoxys, whichever one we're choosing to attack with. Our one prizer of choice. And we cannot do that if they have Aether Paradise out, because that will reduce incoming damage on their Zapdos by 30, which would make Tina do 100, and would make Deoxys do 90. So Altar of the Moon is a replacement stadium that is also good for us. It can give us lower retreat costs with Psychic Energy attached. And then we also have Switch and Escape Rope. But it's not just the Zapdos that we have to worry about damage being reduced on, since it has 110 HP. The Tapu Koko Prism Star has 130. The Pikachu Zekrom Tag Team has 240. Tapu Koko GX has 170. Zoro GX has 190. There's a fair amount of basic lightning types in these lightning archetypes that we definitely want to be doing as much damage as possible to. And lastly, for my Malamar lists, this is more of a tag team toolbox kind of thing, where we have 1 Snorlax, 2 Latios, and 1 Gengar Mimikyu. So I did build this one a little more around the Latios tag team, so we have 3 water energy and also an energy recycle system, so we can try to be attacking with the Latios 240 damage attack as much as possible. I considered taking out the Necrozma GX here, but I didn't. I'm not sure if I would after testing this deck. Like I said, these are just theories. At the bottom, I have consider 1 Wobbuffet from Lost Thunder, just because that can stop opposing Ditto Prism Stars, and Ditto Prism Star evolving into an Alolan Muck on our opponent's side is going to be a huge issue here, because we want to be attacking with these Tag Team GX Pokemon by copying them with Marshadow GX, and we can't do that if our opponent has an Alolan Muck out. So this, like I said, it's more of a toolbox. The problem I have with this initially is, if you do choose to run the 1 Gengar Mimikyu tag team, you're using that for its GX attack. Now you also have Dawnwing Necrozma's GX attack that's good. You have Necrozma's GX attack that's good. And you add Latios tag team, and Snorlax Eevee. You have so many GX attacks to choose from. And normally having more options is better, but if we end up always using 1 or 2 of those GX attacks and the other ones go to waste, then that would mean it's maybe time for cuts somewhere. So now that we've looked at these potential deck lists that I've cooked up, we're going to look at its matchups versus Zapdos Variants. So this is just a list I took from LimitlessTCG.com. It got 6th place at a Champions League in Japan. It's focused around Zapdos, but it also has a fair amount of GX attackers like Jolteon, Tapu Koko GX, and Zoro GX in it. And like I mentioned earlier, it is running those 3 Aether Paradise conservation areas, which can be an issue when we're trying to OHKO Zapdos with a 1 prizer of our own. So let's just take a look at the notes that I wrote here. Giratina trades favorably with Zapdos if Aether Paradise is not out. In the event that Aether Paradise is out, then Zapdos and Tina two-shot each other, with Zapdos having a slight advantage due to Giratina's self-damage and Zapdos' access to Electro Power. Malamar can cycle its Tina from the discard pile, while Zapdos will have to search out a Zapdos, have one ready, or rescue stretcher it, and Zapdos needs less setup than Malamar does. So, I think it's even to favorable for Zapdos if Malamar has no counter stadiums or field blowers. And then I think it's slightly favorable for Malamar if they're playing counter stadium. So if we are not worried about Aether Paradise on Malamar's side, we have a Tina that's just looping itself. And eventually we're also putting those Distortion Door damage counters from Giratina on our opponent's benched Pokemon, making later knockouts even easier. So if you're running field blowers or counter stadiums or some other way around the Aether Paradise conservation area, or just doing more damage to Zapdos and still trading favorably, I think Malamar has a favorable matchup versus the Zapdos variants. So versus the Pikachu Zekrom archetype, which is really like a lightning type toolbox. It has all these Pokemon in it and more. So since Zoro and Pikachu Zekrom are weak to fighting, we have Marshadow GX that can copy attacks from almost any of the attackers we have to successfully OHKO a Zoro GX and a Pikachu Zekrom Tag Team GX. And KOing the Pikachu Zekrom gets us 3 prizes. That's huge if we're just OHKOing it. So they might not even bench Pikachu Zekrom against the Malamar deck, knowing that we play Marshadow GX, which means we're already in the lead because they're not playing one of their most important cards down. Aether Paradise Zapdos, again, can be pesky, so that's why I'm really leaning towards a list with counter stadiums in it. And I'm thinking that a Pikachu Zekrom GX, if they get a full blitz off with 150, put it on a benched Pikachu Zekrom, then we knock out the active with a Wishful Baton on it, and they get a 6 energy Pikachu Zekrom setup to use Tag Bolt for 3 to 4 prizes. That could definitely give them a chance. But don't forget, we could always just use Marshadow GX to copy Moon's Eclipse GX, make them not be able to take a prize off of our active that turn. They'll have to Guzma around it. I think it's favorable for Malamar. We have Marshadow GX. We have heavy hitters like Necrozma GX's Prismatic Burst. We have Moon's Eclipse GX if they take the lead. We have Snorlax's GX attack that does 210, and we draw up to 10 if we have extra energy. I think it looks fairly good for Malamar. A matchup that does not look favorable for Malamar historically is versus Zoro Roc. So this Zoro Roc list from Japan is a bit unconventional. It did get first place, but they're running Nest Ball, Great Ball, Ultra Ball, Lily Engine, whereas in America we've been running Professor Elm's Lecture. So they do have a fair amount of techs here. They have a Let Loose Marshadow, they have 1/1 Muck, they have 1/1 Weavile, and they have 2/2 Rock, and of course Ditto Prism Star. They're running that Nanu card that I mentioned to get Dark Pokemon into play. They're actually running a Grimer, not just an 0/1 Muck line with the Ditto Prism Star, and Muck is a huge problem. So Alone Muck turns off Marshadow GX. That means if we don't have Marshadow GX, we don't have an easy, safe knockout on Zoroark GX. In the event that Marshadow GX can attack, though, one-shots are very, very achievable because we can just copy Pokemon from the discard and make them fighting-type attacks with Marshadow GX, OHKO Zoroarks. Attacking with Snorlax Eevee Tag Team is an option if it's only to take out their only Lycanroc GX. So if they have one Lycanroc GX, they have no Ditto on the bench, no Rockruff on the bench, no Lycanroc GX on the bench, we can use Dump Truck Press to OHKO a Lycanroc, and then we have this huge beefy Pokemon that's weak to fighting, and then they have no fighting Pokemon. The only way they would be able to kill it is if we had 5 abilities on the bench and they use an Evil Admonition from Weavile, so we would just have to play around that. All in all, it is unfavorable for Malamar, but definitely not unwinnable. Last for my matchups, we have Blacephalon. So I've been looking through the Limitless statistics. It looks about 50 to 60% of successful Blacephalon lists run an Alolan Muck alongside a Ditto Prism Star. And Alolan Muck is always bad for Malamar because that means we're not using Marshadow's Let Loose, we're not using Marshadow GX, we're not using Giratina's ability, and that's just enough to shut down our deck in some cases. Since Blacephalon GX will usually take the lead first, Dawnwings Necrozma GX's Moon's Eclipse GX attack is very good. Because Moon's Eclipse GX, you can only use it when you're behind, but then you swing 180 and they can't attack into, or they can attack, but they can't damage or affect our Dawnwings Necrozma with attacks next turn. Lunel Prism is a possible tech if you feel like you're having trouble with this matchup. Since they'll have energy on their board, you'll have energy on your board. You can go for a big hit on their Blacephalon. So the dream sequence for Malamar is that there's a game state of Malamar at 4 prizes, Blacephalon at 3. You use your Dawnwings GX attack, Moon's Eclipse, to swing 180 into Blacephalon. They can't hit your Dawnwings. You want to have a bench of no GXs, all 1 prize Pokemon, and then you go in and clean up with like a Prismatic Burst or copy something with Marshadow next turn on a Blacephalon and win there. Even if Blacephalon plays Alolan Muck, favorable for Malamar otherwise. It might even be slightly favorable for Malamar even with the Alolan Muck in the deck. So I think that Malamar is going to be really strong when Team Up comes out. It's really strong now without it. I hope you guys like this video, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on Malamar lists, what new tag team GXs will be included in the decks, how far off my lists are, if you think they're pretty solid. Be sure to join our Discord. We have a community of players that I'd love to keep growing. We can talk about Pokemon TCG lists in there, tournaments, decks, results, whatever. And I also post, when I'm going live on Twitch and my new YouTube content, and sometimes I'll ask for questions or games or whatever in there. Check out our sponsor, FlipsideGaming.com. You can use code CELIO, all caps, for 10% off of your next order, $10 or more. Subscribe to the channel if you liked the video, and have a great day. I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.